Okay. um, I guess there's a couple things I wanted to point out. I got two cars here. One is the car I ran in Omaha for the first TCS race for 2012, and this is my other car that I ran tonight. I went to the track and ran both cars just to see what was what. This car, it's kind of hard to tell the junk I got piled on here and too many wires and everything else, but anyway, this car has the full long top deck, the fiberglass, and the bottom plate is graphite. This car is what I wound up with an Omaha fiberglass bottom plate, short graphite upper deck. Those are probably the main differences on the car. Other than that, the setups aren't real far removed from each other. This one has the spacers under the camber plate deal. This one doesn't. Although, to be honest with you, the difference in the heights is probably not very great at all. So they're actually fairly close. But I tested both cars out tonight. This car was still good, even at my home track, which is much higher traction, I'd say, than the Omaha track is. The Omaha track it's a they use Jack the Gripper there, and the one thing about Jack the Gripper only tracks, or SXT, which is like the same stuff, Sticky Fingers, it's all kind of the same thing. What happens to those tracks is the line, you have to stay on the black on the track, because as soon as you get off the line, it's all marbles and garbage, and your car takes like 2 laps to clean off. So if you get put off the line, or you try to go around somebody off the line, your car is like junk for a lap, at least. So you got to be concerned with that, because I had a couple times I was trying to get around somebody and sort of went a little too far off the line, and then your car just stinks. It's like goes from dial to like spin out. It kind of stinks. It's the only bad thing about Jack the Gripper is, unless you have a zillion cars on the track, the line's going to be super narrow. So anyway, this car also has the the no cutout on the soft T-plate, no cutout on there. This one I think I also switched over, to the soft T-plate. The thing about out there in Omaha, for what I was doing with this car here, the soft T-plate just made the car like kind of over-rotate and was sort of twitchy. Didn't really want to go in a straight line very much. Sometimes when there's not enough traction, the T-plate with the hold on a second. There we go, my loud furnace. The T-plate with the cutout on it makes the car wanna. It's kind of hard to drive. It doesn't want to go real straight. It flops around. The rear end flops around like way too much. This thing moves, but the other T-plate will make the cars kind of wobble almost. And that's also true for outside too, because sometimes you actually want a stiffer T-plate. If there's not a lot of traction outside, sometimes you want a stiffer T-plate so the car sort of squares up. And that's what the stiffer T-plate will do, to make the car square up a little more. It sounds counterintuitive, because a lot of times, you think thinner T-plate, or like I said, like with the cutout in there or whatever, that's going to be more. You think it's going to be better for traction, but sometimes, if the car is just doing this stuff all the time, your car wanders all over the track. It doesn't just want to stay in a straight line. So that's that end of it. Now, one thing I will say, you can see the split. You got the split deck here. You can kind of see this car will actually do this. It really makes the front end pick up traction. Normally I wouldn't run that inside, but the combination of this type of action on the front end with the B tire up front and the A tire in back. You know, the B tire is more like a purple. It's a stiffer tire. The A tires are more like a yellow or or a black or something like that. It's a not a natural rubber compound. The B tires seem to be more of like a natural rubber, like a purple or magenta. That combination of that split upper deck and the B tire was actually really good. The car was really drivable. It would drive into the corner like, it just, you could just turn the wheel and it was very linear, the way it drove. Normally, and this is probably true why the car was good. Normally when you run a split deck, the car becomes less reactive, which was true. It was a little bit dead, which is probably good, because not being as much traction as normal, the rear end would want to move around a little bit sometimes. So that probably helped to make the car a little easier to drive. And also just the fact that, like, what I did go to 4, at one point I had 4 Bs instead of the B and the A, or the A and the A. I had 4 Bs, and the car was just sort of, it went around the track alright, but it just sort of didn't steer at all. It just was, didn't want to do much of anything. So then I went to the A's on the back, with this split upper deck, and at that point the car really did have a lot of steering. It was very good, because normal, like this car here, has the full upper deck, as you can see, and I ran this tonight, with the graphite and the whole 9 yards, and it didn't steer as much. Number one. Number two, when I went to I have the smaller battery in both these, like the E-Revo size battery. They weigh like, they're 96 grams. I think that they're not real long. They're only like under 100 millimeters long, I believe. But anyway, when I went to I kept trying to get steering into this car, and with a full-size battery, it worked pretty good. I could hit some fast lap times, but this car, especially once I kind of got a couple things dialed in on it, and it wasn't much, it would do the fast lap times, like, it would do a ton of fast lap times. This one would only do maybe 4 or 5 laps that were as fast as this car. The only problem was, it seemed like this car might have faded a little more with this battery, whereas this car, even though it was running slower, ran more consistently over the run with a bigger battery in it. So I did decide to try the small battery in there. I don't know if you can see this thing, the little Revo battery in there. It's 1800 LiPo. Anyway, I tried to run that, and the car actually was flipping off the track, because with the larger, slightly heavier battery, I tried to dial a little more steering into the car. I went to 2 millimeters, or 2 degrees camber up here, and that just made the car want to tip very easily. With the lighter battery, there's less weight to keep it on the ground, and it wanted to tip up. Whereas this car, oddly enough, this car has just 1 degree camber in the front, and probably a little less angle on the arm. I have this car has a little less spacers on top of the arm. This car has more. This one has, I think, 2 millimeters on top. This one has 1, and I think that I think that we're creating a larger angle on this because of that. So you're basically getting more camber. You have more camber already and more camber gain. So this car didn't want to flip at all, and was actually really good. Like I said, I just was a little concerned with, wasn't sure if the battery was fading in the car, or if the tires were going away, and it's still not 100%. And what was odd was, in in Nebraska, I ran, this is a Orion 1950 milliamp 20C pack. I was able to run, almost as fast a laps at the end of the run as when I started. So I didn't feel like that was a problem. I think the hot lap drop off was like 4/10, which, when you look at it, probably isn't all that bad. Because I remember one run I ended on a 13.0 and the fastest I had done was a 12.6, so that wasn't too bad. I was seeing some drop off tonight with this car, and I just was unsure if it was related to the tires, because sometimes you kind of run you kind of blow the traction on the tires a little bit, and then the car doesn't run as fast. Or if it was the battery. So I don't know. I'm still a little bit unsure which one it was. That being said, though, right now this car is working better. And what I do think is that this car with a long upper deck, if you are going to run a car with a long upper deck, and the traction is fairly, is on a carpet track is fairly high, you might have to run the A tires all the way around. Now they would have to run a small A tire on the front to keep the car from wanting to flip off the track. You have to run a pretty small tire and make sure you glue the sidewall. But this car actually has a fairly small B front tire, which is probably, an A tire would be way too much with this upper deck setup and the fiberglass. It's just, your car would be doing pirouettes and donuts. But the B tire is just about perfect, and the A tire locks her rear end down, so it's good. It's very good. That, and also I have O-rings under these two, and then these two back here. I have O-rings under all the post upper deck screws, and that's just to let the car flex even more. You want, because I don't know if you can really see it so much, but you can see the whole car kind of flexes around. And that at that track there was traction, but it's just never like at home. The track I usually race at, which is crazy traction. The thing too, I think part of it playing into it was the Jack the Gripper, which I don't think, unless you have an extreme amount of cars on the track, which there weren't. There might have like 50 entries. If you go to a big race where there's 150 entries or 200 entries, the Jack the Gripper line, there's so many cars on the track, it's going to spread out. The line was, maybe about, 3 or 4 car lengths wide going around the track, which, like I said, if you get off the line, you're done, at least for that lap. But this worked out good for that particular track. Normally, I would think that the long upper deck would work better for a track where they use Paragon, or a track with a ton of entries. I probably would be more likely to try an upper deck that's long, or possibly the full A combination, which I didn't try tonight. I was just taking this set of tires and going back and forth between cars to evaluate what was what. So that's kind of that. Didn't have too much weight on the cars. Like here I think I had 7 grams and then 14 on this side to kind of balance out with the speed control. And I also had a little bit of lead on the receiver too to balance out the speed control. But that's about it. Because, like I said, this battery, I think this one's about 96 grams, this one's like 106 grams. It's a little bit heavier. But that's, the other lightest battery I have is I think it weighs 160 grams, and that's a 2700 full-size battery. The next thing up, almost every other battery out there is going to weigh at least 200 grams. So you're talking, 100 gram difference, which is almost 4 ounces, which is unbelievable. Even the difference between this battery and the 2700 I have is a little more than 2 ounces. And it honestly makes a difference. You know, the cars with the smaller batteries turn harder. You know, because they're just lighter. They just turn harder. A little more steering. The motor, you have more acceleration because the motor's not moving as much mass. You can actually even gear a little higher if you want to. You know, but that depends on the rule set too, though, because you know, at a certain, some tracks don't let you run the small batteries. Roar's not going to let you run a battery if you're racing in a Roar sanctioned race. You're not going to be able to run this battery. You have to run a Roar legal battery. You know, so you have to, it's kind of horses for courses. You have to figure out what you're going to be doing, where you're going to be running at. Other than that, though, you know, nothing too surprising. You know, as far as that goes. You know, still black springs. Still, you know, 35 weight. Now I went to a yellow spring in there just because, like I said, the track was a little bit lower traction. Usually I run a blue on carpet with foam tires. And then like 20,000 weight on the plate. You know, and that's pretty much that. Like I said, the car was really good once I got everything squared away, but it took a while because I didn't think about the fact that, you know, this is kind of what I showed up with, and this is what I wound up with. You know, I had a graphite plate, I had a full long deck, I had the T-plate with the cutout, and all these things put together just made the car didn't have enough traction, and it was kind of hard to drive. This got the car to plenty of traction and actually pretty easy to drive for the most part, as long as you didn't go too far out on the dope. At one point I was getting pretty far out on the tire, you know, like maybe 2/3 or something like that on the tire, and really most of the time it was about 1/3 to 1/2 depending. That was probably the proper place to be. You know, so, and the guy who won basically had an X1 car with the long upper deck for the X1, which if you look at that upper deck is probably almost as flexible as this here, just with the exception of it's not going to flex, you know, it's not going to flex front to back like this one will. But you know, because it's only just a little spine running from here to here, versus, you know, like these cars where it's fully boxed. It's just a straight piece of graphite, so there's you can do a lot of twisting. You know, his car looked good, and same thing, you know, X car with a fiberglass lower deck. You know, so probably unless your track is unless you're running a Paragon high bite track, you probably could actually get away with the fiberglass lower deck in most situations. In fact, a couple years ago I raced the last trackside TCS race, you know, carpet track, but it was all non-odor Jack the Gripper, and I actually ran a fiberglass lower deck and then the fiberglass full long upper deck, and the car was great. So, you know, you kind of have to. It's nice to have options with these cars, because really, if you look at, you know, this I mean, this thing is super thick, this graphite, and it's probably overkill in a lot of situations. You know, this is thick too, but it still has a lot of a lot more flex in the graphite. Well, I mean, this is some serious graphite. It's very stiff, whereas this is, you know, it's stiff, but it still has more give in general. So that's kind of the general rundown on the cars. You know, I think I wound up rolling out just to give you an idea. The track Tommyplex is a big track, but it's not. They had it set up in a kind of a shorter than, like, they probably took 10 feet off the end of the straightaway. I rolled out at probably about 70 millimeters, and that was pretty good. So, you know, 70 is probably pretty good. I I usually tell people to start at 68 on carpet, 68 millimeters, but 70 was good here. And when I had a bunch of timing, then cranked down the can of the motor. So maybe 70 is a new place to start. But I think that'll cover most of the goings on of the goings on. So yeah, good luck at your next race.